Good afternoon, everyone. This is Angela Goodman, and welcome to Evolve Through God. We are here today with one of my friends from Arete, John Wentworth. John and I had the pleasure of meeting each other at an Arete summit. Let's see, that would have been November of 20. Oh my gosh, that's been 23. So that's been a year and a half ago almost. And John is an amazing man. He is a man of faith. He led a beautiful prayer for us prior to jumping on the podcast today. And so I just want to welcome John, and then we're going to dive right in.
Well, thank you so much for having me on. It's a pleasure. I don't know why I'm already emotional, but
Oh,
I guess that's just God doing his work. And it's funny you say where we met and when. This is the book. And so it's like, oh, I can turn right to the page. I got all my notes here.
oh man, I love it. I love it. That is definitely the beauty of Arete. And for our listeners who maybe don't know about the Arete Syndicate, it's a lot of the reason why I arrived at where I am in my faith walk. And I've met so many incredible human beings. And as I said, John is one of them.
Yeah, well, and I feel
So
the same way with you. I mean, I have an opportunity to chat with you, and as at that time, you know, struggling with my drinking and just being able to be in that space, and I feel like God put, you in my vision, and we had some great conversation, and it meant a
mhm.
lot to me. So I'm honored to be on with you today.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate that. And I'm sure we'll get to that at some point in time today. I'm super proud of you for all of your vulnerability and your ability to share your walk and journey because that helps so many people. So thank you for that.
For sure.
So let's talk at the beginning because I don't know anything. So I know nothing about your faith walk at all. So I'm really curious to know and dying to know what started you off. Like, when did you first start to understand what God was and have a relationship? And what does that look like for you?
Yeah, I mean, there was a pivotal turning point for me. And, I never went to church when I was young. My mother committed suicide when I was 5.
Oh,
I was
wow.
raised by my father, obviously, but he wasn't taking you to church. Let's just put it that way. And, and I'm fine talking about any of that. But the point in the answer to here is like, I never really had a relationship with Jesus. I would pray. I believe God existed. I would go to church very occasionally with my grandparents when I was staying at their place. Um, but I mean, I'm 52 now, and I was mid 40s when I was invited to a men's retreat at our
Mm.
church. Now, at that time, it wasn't my church. I say our church. It was just
Yeah.
a church. And these people kept inviting me. I'm like, no, I'm good, man. I'm good. And my journey going from, being 35 and flat broke to where I was when people were starting to ask me, I'm like, I'm doing good. I don't need to go to that.
Yeah.
And then a different person asked me, and then a different person asked me. And I'm like, well, geez, this would probably be good for business, selfishly. I guess gotta figure out how to get you there one way or another.
That's right.
And I went in there and I cried for 2 days straight. I met the Holy Spirit, and it was just I walked out of there and I realized how much I was really missing. And I also realized how much I was hurting. I think that
Yeah.
um, I was so good at suppressing everything from my childhood because
Hmm.
I had to. That was my defense mechanism. And that I didn't deal with things for so long that once I got in there and I found forgiveness for my mother, I found forgiveness for my dad, I found forgiveness for myself.
Hmm.
I left and I was like, oh my gosh, there's a whole new world out there. And I was now, I mean, literally, like I stepped into the church and you stayed the night there, right? And then I
Yeah.
stepped out and it was as if I stepped into a different world. And I just saw everything differently.
Wow.
It was really powerful.
That's so powerful.
It was really powerful. And, it just, some of the exercises that we did, and, still to this day, like when we have our one day here at the house, I carry some of those
Mhm.
exercises into that business. It's a business mastermind, but I still want to bring in these emotional feelings for people, and just really, really good stuff.
So let's talk a little bit about then your time before that, just so we can kind of get a feel for mentally where you are. So at 35, you said that was the target you gave us just a moment
Yep.
ago. At 35, where you said you didn't have much at that point in time. So what was your life like from 0 to 35? What did you go to school? Did you have what talk to us a little bit about? I know, so you get a smile on your face. But talk
I mean, I
if
went to
you're okay
school.
with that, let's hear a little bit about what John's life was like before that.
I mean, I think that as a young child, I was in Flint, Michigan, right?
Mhm.
If you lived in Flint, you pretty much your parents worked at General Motors,
Mhm.
and my dad worked at General Motors. We lived in a single wide trailer. I mean, that was what I grew up in,
Mhm.
and my mother was very abusive. Um, so kind of the opposite of what I think the norm is, right? We think about the man being the abusive one. My mother was the abusive one. And she was I was like I said, I was 6 when she committed suicide, excuse me. At 5, she started molesting me.
Wow.
And even at 5, like you don't even know whether I think when I look at all of this thing and I look back on it, it's like, yeah, whatever. That really wasn't the big deal. Right? I mean,
You don't know it's wrong then.
well,
Like
that's just
you don't know
it.
that's wrong.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and even now, like, yeah, I know it's wrong, but who cares? Like, what I remember is feeling abandoned. What I remember is her hanging in our basement because I found her,
Oh
right? And
wow.
it's and that I remember. Why would you leave me? That mattered more than the other stuff.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so that was kind of the story. My mom was just kind of, I guess you would say, mentally. She was mentally later in life. I learned that she had been essentially mentally impacted by these drugs that she was doing.
Mm.
And I'll get to that. I'll fast forward to that. But all of this stuff was going on inside of this single wide trailer. And then I remember my mother and my dad, they'd fight, and she would say, I'm going to kill myself. And I didn't really understand what that meant.
Mhm.
And then we moved to a new home, a big white house at the bottom of the hill in a subdivision. And I just like, we had a pool, and I'm like, everything's going to be okay now.
Mhm.
And then just like anything else, that behavior started to repeat itself.
Mhm.
And one morning I went looking for her, and I'm upstairs trying to get dressed. I can't get my sweatshirt on my head, and I'm like, Mom, Mom, Mom. I go downstairs and I go around the circle, Mom, 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 and I can't find her. And then I go downstairs in the basement. I turn the corner, and she's hanging there.
Wow.
And I'm in my underwear and a sweatshirt, and I run to the neighbors, you know. And it's interesting. The neighbors come back to the house with me
Mhm.
and take me in the basement, and I watch them cut her down, and
Wow.
watch her hit the cement floor. And it's just like, I want people aren't thinking in that moment, like, no, keep him out here, you know what I
Yeah,
mean?
like he doesn't need to see that.
And I look at all of that stuff still to this day, and I'm like, those are the things that God wanted me to experience, to
Yeah.
shape me to who I am to this day, to have this, I think, tremendous compassion for people and empathy for people.
Mhm.
Um, and so that was when she died, and after that, my dad, and he's sober now, because I got him
Okay.
to that men's retreat that I went to.
That's awesome.
But after that, he became a heavy drinker, and
Mhm.
very. It was interesting. I lived in this duality of a home. Like he'd give me everything I needed, except what I really needed. Right? Like we had a pool, we
Mhm.
had a basketball court, and I got a motorcycle and a three-wheeler and a four-wheeler, but I just didn't have a dad. I just
Yeah,
didn't
you
have
didn't
a
have
dad. Yeah.
that
I
emotional support.
yeah. I
Yeah.
I had the you're a piece of shit, you'll never amount to anything, you'll never be anything. You're, just this barrage, and again, like I wouldn't change a thing.
No,
Um,
I mean, God gives us those are gifts. And maybe you don't get to today feeling that way.
right.
There is that mindset shift, which I'm sure we're going to talk about, but
Yes.
those were gifts for you to strengthen you to become what you
Yeah.
are now.
100%. And that's
Yeah.
how I'm able to lead 100 people inside of our organization, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that I would never be able to do that otherwise, because I certainly don't have any education in it or business background. But so, just growing up, like I threw myself into sports. That was kind of my escape from everything. And
Do you
but
remember if you threw yourself into sports? Do you remember during that time was there ever a time where the teams would pray before games
oh
where
no.
Right.
No,
No, there was none of that.
none of that. And, it's funny because I look at the journey of getting to when I finally met God.
Hmm.
And even in a lot of the goodness, and by the way, like for the people listening or for you, the
Hmm.
people that have experienced it will get this. The people that haven't just need to know, like, as soon as you surrender, as soon as you stop trying to control, as soon as you get vulnerable and open up and let
Hmm.
God do what He's already trying to do, you're just not seeing it
Hmm.
because, we get in our own way because we're all knuckleheads. Uh, you realize that He's always at work.
Yeah.
It's just whether we've allowed the door to be open or, he'll open the door, but are we willing to walk through it? And most of the time we don't even know the door's open.
Yeah.
And so I look back at my life of all these times that he was attempting, to bring me through the threshold, I guess you would say. Um, but many of those times he never presented himself. It was always through something else, and which is when I started this journey of really fixing myself. When I got sober for the first time, I didn't meet God first. I got sober first.
Yeah.
And then I went in and out of that again, still, right?
Yeah.
Uh, Before going to that men's retreat. So no sports teams prayed. I went to a public school. There was no prayer there.
Hmm.
Uh, and I just was never around it,
Hmm.
So it was not something that I ever looked to, thought about. And I do remember at times that I would say the Our Father. I don't even know where I got it from.
Yeah.
And and I don't know why I would say it. I would go from cursing God to then praying,
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
interesting, a lot of duality, I think, in that journey. And it is a journey.
Yeah. Yeah. It is a journey. I similarly, I didn't have a lot of that influence either. So I know where you're coming from with that. It's not when it's not around you, you don't feel it.
Yeah.
And then you question it at times. And even if you're getting those nudges, even when they present, you're like, I don't know what that is.
Well, yeah, because when you do see it, it's foreign to you,
Hmm.
right? And so it's like the closer you get to it, the more you kind of repel from it because like, well, I don't understand that. So
Yeah.
why would I go towards what I don't understand?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So no, it's very true.
So the gentleman that you met, so you said you were in we'll fast forward a little bit to your late 40s. You said you went to the men's retreat. How did you meet the gentleman that then introduced you to that in your life,
Well, there were a few
to
different people
church? Yeah.
yeah, there were a few different people that were encouraging me to go to that retreat. And so it was one was somebody that I did business with, one was somebody that was in a similar business but happened to be my neighbor. And the
Hmm.
neighbor is essentially the one that kind of got me to go. And the journey piece of it, once I got in there, it was like, I mean,
Yeah.
the angels
So
were
they
everywhere.
invite you to this retreat and you're not a churchgoer at that point in time. You don't have anything to do with it. You're just like, there's going to be a bunch of bros hanging out. And so you're like, all right, fine, I guess I'll go.
Yeah, 100%.
And at this time, you were still struggling with alcoholism or
Well,
no?
yeah, I mean, my alcoholism was always been like kind of on and off, right?
Hmm.
I turn it off for a while and then it would slowly come back. And it was never, I mean, I was always functional inside of it.
Hmm.
I just wasn't who I wanted to be or the best version of who I could be.
Hmm.
And I knew that. And it just always bothered me. And so it would be like if I was not going to drink that day and had one glass of wine, I would be very mad at myself. I would wake up the next day and like, what the hell, man? So it wasn't like this debacle. Now, again, I also don't want to diminish it because plenty mornings I woke up, my wife was not laying next to me, right?
Yeah.
And that was a tough pill to swallow. I remember saying to one of my coaches, I'm like, I know it's just a matter of time where like, there's only so many of those nights that I'm going to be forgiven for, right?
Hmm.
Whatever the fuck happened, I don't even know, you
Hmm.
know? And, and so alcohol's a funny thing because it is, I've never done any other drugs, by the way. I mean, I guess in high school, you smoke weed, whatever, but it is a drug that slowly
Hmm.
over a long period of time begins to consume you.
Hmm.
And it's a drug that everybody thinks is just fine.
Yeah. Well,
You know
yeah,
what I mean?
it's yeah, in fact it's looked upon as you're weird if you don't
Yeah.
drink. Yeah.
So it's kind of like your ego. I mean, if you think about it, alcohol is a very sneaky thing,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know? So, I don't know where we were. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, no, no. It always sits with me. Everybody's story is so different that there's always that one pivotal moment, but it wasn't just that one moment, right? So it wasn't just that one retreat. Like you literally had been led up to that point, and finally God said, "Okay, I'm banging on you. I'm going
Yeah.
to put this person in your life, and this person's going to live next to you, and that person's going to have this, and we're going to come at you from all angles."
Amen.
But there were these little nudges, right, up into that point, before you finally got the final God punch of, bro, I've been calling you back. Where have you been?
I mean, the final God punch to really quit drinking was with Ed when we were at that summit. And I'll share
Yeah.
that story here in a little bit. I don't want to jump too far ahead, but maybe I should. I don't know, but
No, you can do it. Let's do it.
yeah, I mean,
Go
it's
right
like
for it.
you were there when I shared, and this is the thing, like I literally went to that summit to talk to Ed about my drinking. I don't know why. I heard Ed speak about his
Mm,
father, like
mm,
his dad. I felt like we were one generation behind, right?
yeah.
And so when I shared that with him, I mean, I went up to Ed. He's getting a coffee. He's getting ready to go on stage, and I shared with him. I said, "Man, I'm really struggling with my drinking, and I wanted to share this with you. I just feel like God's telling me I need to talk to you about this." And he
Hmm.
said, "How bad is it?" And I said, "Bad enough. I'm telling you, bro. You know what I mean? Like I
Yeah.
figured I'd tell
Yeah.
you then."
Yeah. I mean, you're
And
humbling yourself
yes,
in this moment in front of Ed Mylett. Okay.
yeah, and I
And for
think
those people listening who don't know who Ed is, Ed is like the number one motivational speaker in the world and has this massive podcast and this huge following. And he's, the son of
and
an
a huge
alcoholic
heart.
dad. And yes, he's a massive, and he changed my life too. I mean, we wouldn't be on this podcast.
Yeah,
It wasn't for times that I've sat with him. So for you to humble yourself like that, first summit you've ever attended, you hadn't been
yeah.
in Arte that long, like you've never really met him before.
No,
It's
I've
not like
never met
he
him.
had
No,
yeah, it's not like he had some kind of like John's a great guy and he's a great
no,
businessman background. Literally,
no.
that's
And
the first thing you say.
there was also this piece to me too. Like I'm not just trying to get a picture. I don't care about getting a picture with that.
No,
You know what I'm saying? Like in
you
other
knew
words,
he would change your life. God knew he
exactly,
would change your life.
exactly.
Yeah.
And so, like, I remember he's stirring his coffee as we're having this conversation, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he says, "Well, have you ever thought about checking yourself in, going somewhere?" And I said, "I have actually. I got a tab pulled up on my phone right now." He goes, "Well, there's," and he tells me a little bit of a story about someone in his life that was kind of a private story that was happening in the moment. And he goes, there's a place in Tennessee that I've heard really good things about. I go, I think the place that I have pulled up is in Tennessee, but I didn't look. I didn't have time. He's getting ready to go on stage.
Mm-hmm.
And the conversation ensues a little bit more. And then he's like, I got to go. They called him up and he goes. And then that's when he started talking about this neurochemistry. And that's when I realized, like, when I'm in the gym thinking about not drinking, from a neurochemistry standpoint, I'm talking myself into drinking. And that
Yep.
was the question that I asked him afterwards.
Yep.
And so when he asked us to create our game film, right, which was taking three things that have already happened from your past and then tying them to the three things that you wanted for your future, but playing that out as if it already happened, that was a huge piece to my sobriety, right?
Mm.
So when I like and this is what I did when I came home from the summit every single day while I was working out, while I was in this heightened state of energy and emotion, I would play the game film, right? And the game film was I delivered all of my kids, like hike, right? So the game film was delivering my children. Well, first it was Jen and I at our wedding, then delivering the children. And then we had a thoroughbred that won a great big race. And the reason that moment is etched in my vision is there was a newspaper there that took a bunch of pictures of our family and my wife screaming and the kids and so there's that picture and then I go right into I wake up 1 year from that date sober. I walk out of my bedroom, the kids are there, they hug me and they said, "Dad, we're so proud of you,"
No.
you know, and it's just a different day. And then we leave, we go get on the plane at the airport that I had leased for that day, fly to Florida, and I'm on Ed Mylett's podcast. And that's what I
Mm.
played every day. Now, one of
No.
those three things happened, but it's the only one that needed to happen.
Yeah.
And that was my sobriety. And
Yeah.
it's funny. My wife said the other day, she's like, we just got our tax stuff. And it says that you lost XYZ gambling. I won't say the number. And literally, when I quit drinking, that was the first thing I did to replace my time. I'm
Ah.
on racehorses, right? So I'm
Yeah.
in here. horses every night. And now I'm done with that as well. It's been since the first of the year. So
Yeah.
it's like you go through these things, but you can, and I think this is with anything in life and business, like you can really only master one thing at a time.
That's
You know?
true. That's true. And also I think having helped people in their business and in their development myself, what I've noticed is God only allows us to do one at a time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because once you start, you're supposed to be finished with it. And you
Mm,
can't finish it if you're not 100% focused on it.
in it. In it. Well,
Yeah.
so, I that day ends and we go to dinner that night, and if you
Mhm.
recall, it was at that outside, I don't even remember what it was, but
Oh, yeah, it was a beautiful place, right outside of Savannah. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
gorgeous spot. And
Hmm.
by the way, like when I bought my ticket for the summit, I wasn't going to drink until the summit. Like I'm not drinking all the way up to the summit.
Mm,
And I wasn't going to drink for 30 days. Then it was 2 weeks.
mm,
Then it was the
mm,
night before the summit, and I was in the freaking bar by myself drinking.
mm.
So this thing just slowly invades you. You know what I mean? And it
Yeah.
and it has when it like it's, I always feel like it's one thing to break promises to other people. When you start breaking promises to yourself, you know what I mean? Like that's deep. Um, because it's easy to make excuses when you break promises to other, but you know the truth. But when you're breaking them to yourself,
Yeah.
anyway, that night we go there and there's a bar because we're outside, right? There's a
Yep.
bar
Yep.
and there's a cigar.
Yep. Yep. The
I
little
don't
cigar
remember.
area. Yep.
It
There's
was like
always
a
one. Mm-hmm.
it was a Airstream converted
Mm-hmm.
to a cigar thing. Well, I never had a cigar, so I go in there. I'm like, shit, I might as well get a cigar. I get my cigar. I've never had one, and it's fine. It's all good. I come outside and somebody comes up to me and says, "Man, thanks for sharing today about your drinking. I've really been struggling." And this is the other thing I've noticed, man. A
Yes.
lot of people struggle
Yes.
with drinking. A
Yes.
lot of people, and a lot of people that you would not expect. Anyway, we're having this conversation and it was great. And all of a sudden, and we're in suits and ties and dresses and
Mm-hmm.
we're glammed up. And then there's a guy standing next to me in a sweatsuit. And that really struck me. I'm like, oh, that's just not just underdressed, right?
Mm-hmm.
We start having a conversation. How are you guys enjoying the summit? Oh, it's really good. What are you doing here? Like, right? Because
Yeah.
oh, I'm your speaker for tomorrow. Oh, cool. What's your name? He introduced himself. What's the guy that owns Tommy John's?
Yep.
So he says, what are you guys talking about? And, me, I'm an open book. We start talking about the drinking thing. And he's like, well, how bad is it? And I said, bad enough, blah, 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 blah. He said, well, you ever thought about checking yourself in? And I said, yeah. I said,
Ooh.
actually, Ed asked me that. Yeah, watch this. I
Yeah.
said, Ed asked me that today. And I told him yes. And he said, well, a buddy of mine works at a place in Tennessee. Now I have time.
Wow. Oh, a massive God moment right
I
there.
open my window and I open the thing up and I show it to him. He goes, yeah, that's it. That's where he works. I'm like, I'm blown away, right? So now literally
Yeah.
I leave the conversation. I go to find Ed. He happens to be in line. He's got a plate of food like this, right? I
Yep.
go, Ed, I gotta tell you this. I just met the guy that, this is what I'm saying. I just met the guy that owns
Yeah.
Tommy
Yeah.
John's. He's
Yeah.
like, he's like, yeah. I'm
He's
like,
like,
no, but
duh, he's here.
you gotta hear what happened. And I tell him the story and he goes, like backhands me on the chest. He said, if that's not a God moment, you're never going to get one. Or if that's not a sign from
Yeah.
God, you're never going to get one. And I was done drinking right there. And then I don't even feel like I'm sober. I just don't drink anymore.
Yeah. It's not
And
your
that,
identity. It's not your identity
no,
anymore.
no.
Yeah.
So that summit
So
again,
so literally God whacked you in the form of Ed Mylett
yes.
with his hand in the chest. God
Yeah.
said, John, you're
Yeah.
done.
Yeah.
It's over.
Yeah.
That's so
Yeah.
powerful.
Yeah. And I woke up the next day. I remember telling my wife, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I could hear in her voice, as much as she tried to disguise it, I've heard this before.
Oh man. That
You
had to be a
know,
knife to the heart. Yeah.
it was only because I knew I was done. Only because I knew I was finally done.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, I took full responsibility for that. Like, well, of course she would feel that way,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
You tell your kids, of course they're going to feel that way because they've heard it all before.
Mm-hmm.
And so you got to go prove it, you know? And
Right.
here we are, 14 months, 15 months. I don't even know. It doesn't even matter anymore, the time of it.
No, no, it's the fact
Yeah.
that you arrived. You
Yep.
you arrived there. So
Yep.
what is Jen's faith like? And I think that you mentioned her name earlier, right?
Yep.
So
Um, Jen grew up in a Catholic household. I mean, like when our kids got baptized, I didn't even know what the heck that meant. Like it
yeah.
meant nothing to me. I'm like, okay, you know?
Yeah.
And but I think probably not necessarily a strict Catholic household, a strict Catholic family whole dynamic, right?
Okay.
And I think what I notice with a lot of people like that is they're kind of burnt out on it and they don't want to go,
Yeah.
you know? So, um,
I mean, that was my parents, quite honestly.
yeah,
That's why I never went to church when I was growing up because my dad went to Catholic church and didn't really want to have anything to do with it. And my mom went to Catholic school, and it was like it was the rules and the doctrines and all of that. They didn't want their children to be exposed to it.
yeah. I know, and it's funny, because you said something before we even started the podcast that I thought was really powerful and exactly how I view it. It's like I don't care what kind of God that people believe in, as long as it's
Mm,
like a loving God, a true
yeah.
God. And
Yeah.
so for me, I kind of think this way, like politics is the other angle of this that I look at because I never voted in my life until the last three elections, right? Because I trained racehorses for 20 years. They don't care who's president.
No,
What I mean?
no. Yeah.
And so I looked at politics and say I didn't have an upbringing of what you should be. I didn't have an upbringing in church of what denomination you should be.
Mm-hmm.
I just happened to go to a men's retreat at a Catholic church. And so I became Catholic.
Mm-hmm.
I go to the non-denominational church down the road all the time. So I don't ever view it as like which church is better. Some of the the stern things that we do in the Catholic Church are also some of the things that you miss when you step away from it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So there's a lot
Yeah.
of duality to that. I just try to um, I try to go to church as much as I can. I usually end up there with a couple of guys on my team that at 9 a.m. right up the street, and we enjoy it. We have fun, and then we grab breakfast afterwards.
I love
So
that.
my wife is a prayer for my wife is quiet with everything she does, right? So she's not going to
Mhm.
pray out loud. She's not timid, but she's timid in the sense of um
She's just private. She just wants to
she's
keep it
just
to
private.
herself.
Yeah. That's the best way to put it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I respect that. I mean, I personally feel like our relationship with God is an individual relationship. And yes, God wants us to be in community because, he wants us to be able to help each other and he wants us to be able to support each other and he wants us to do all those things. So he wants us to be in community and go to church and worship in that way so we can find a community to help. We're all supposed to help each
Yeah.
other, right?
Yes.
But we at the
And I think
same
too, he gives
time,
us
yeah, the individual relationship with God is what matters most.
and he taps into all of our individual assets differently, right?
Yes.
Like,
Yeah.
I'm somebody that my big thing for me, and I think it's just how I grew up, and I like to take these people, these underdogs, these people that maybe don't believe in themselves,
Mm-hmm.
and those are the people that I'm most attracted to because I want to see them change. I want to change their lives, right? And
Yeah.
those are the people that I usually surround myself with. And then part of that is the faith thing,
I mean,
So like
you
in our
you
gym, we have a
recognize that
gym,
that's who you were, right? You're
100%,
helping the people who you were, you know?
100%. And that's
That's
who you're
what
most equipped to help, right?
that's right. That's exactly right.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's exactly right. I love it. That's so strong. So now that you are you said you go regularly to worship with your guy friends to the church down the street. Are there other practices and things that you've sort of built into your life that bring you closer to God?
So one thing that we do inside of our business, right? I own a real estate company. We've got four different offices. We've got between the real estate company and the title company and the ancillaries that are there's probably getting close to 100 people now. But team meeting, we pray. I am of this thought process, right? I know who I am. I know who I'm not. I'm not trying to be everything to everyone.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to be me. And if that is who you align with, and this is from a business owner that, I mean, we did almost 400 million in volume last year. Like
It's
this is a big
amazing.
business,
Yeah.
but I'm not going to change anything about who I am for my business because it's for the masses,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So we pray before team meeting. And if that doesn't align with somebody that's thinking about joining our team, that's fine. Then we're not the right team for you,
Mm-hmm.
right? We pray before all of our meetings. We have different meetings throughout the week. I put a gym in the basement of our company. I hired a trainer. That trainer also was a youth pastor. So we do
Nice.
we do morning prayer on Thursdays, which was today. He leads a Bible study for whoever wants to attend it inside of our organization. So just a lot of stuff that is organic that we do. We just open our arms to whoever wants to be a part of it, and to do that.
I love that.
And then the mastermind that we're doing, that I've started, I have a vision for where that's going to go. And all of this stuff is without pushing anything on anyone. It's just,
Yeah.
this is who we are. And if you align with that, great. And if you don't, that's okay too.
Yeah.
So a lot of organic stuff inside of what we're already doing. And I will say this to answer your question, what I need to do a better job of is some individual stuff for moi,
Mm-hmm.
building my relationship with Jesus. Sometimes I'm so focused on everybody else around me that I need to. And I think that's why I'm a little emotional today in this. Like just seeing the title of the podcast, like, has me and understanding what you're doing and listening to your
Mm-hmm.
conversation from the podcast that you sent me. I think that's something that I recognize I need to do a better job of. And there are seasons of that when I do a really good job, and there are seasons of it when I don't.
Yeah. Yeah,
Well,
well, we're all human, right? We go through our ups and downs, and sometimes we get our priorities in a place that could use a little bit of adjustment, right? And that's just a normal thing, regardless of what it is you want to prioritize. I think it's beautiful that you offer a safe space for people who are believers to work and flourish and also strengthen their own connections. It's so important to feel comfortable in that, regardless, to your point and to what we talked about earlier, regardless of what denomination you are or what specific faith you are. If you are a believer of God and you believe there is one creator and one source, which
yeah,
covers a whole lot of religions, right?
I
You should you should feel comfortable talking about your belief and
yeah.
in all aspects of your life.
Yeah. And I've had people on our team, like as we've grown, we move into, other areas that,
Mm-hmm.
have other, just a mix of ethnicities. And, I've had agents say, oh, like when I put Merry Christmas on a billboard, it says Merry Christmas.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm not going to hide any of that. And, we've always been doing that. We've been doing that forever. So I love to see that there's this shift that seems to be occurring where we're seeing more people talking about outwardly about Jesus and the relationship. And we're seeing that
Mm.
more in sports. And I almost sometimes watch sports. I'm like, this is just the cool thing now they're all doing. Like they used to, do this
Yeah,
and now,
they used to not take a knee and do all the other
right.
garbage and whatnot when the foundation of this beautiful
Yeah.
country is
So, and I just say to them, look, I'm not changing anything. No matter how big we get, I'm not changing anything. And and if that means that we have less growth because of that, I don't care.
yeah. Yeah.
I'm fine with that. It's okay.
Yeah.
We'll go get it some other way. You
Have
know.
you have you read the book yet? The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry.
Mm-mm.
Get that book, or maybe I'll send it to you.
Uh,
That book is Christ based, but it was written by a pastor who will convince you that you need more time in your day for John.
I like that. I like the
Mm-hmm.
title of it too because I really look at our business that way. Like I'm on, I'm looking at my whiteboard when I do this here from a coaching call the other day, but it's like I'm not in a rush to do anything inside of our business. I used to work at Remax and we built a pretty big team at Remax. And I got fired from Remax one day and didn't do anything wrong. It's not worth the conversation, right? Um, it's not worth using this time for that. The point in that is like everyone used to say to me, when are you guys going to go independent? When are you going to go independent? And I'm like, whenever God says, I'm not chasing that, I'm
Mm-hmm.
not chasing my name on the building. And when God said it was time, he threw me out of a window, and so here
Yeah.
we are. But I've
Yeah.
just never, and I think that's served me really well in business, is I've never gotten out over my skis. I've just always been like, I'm going to work my butt off. I'm going to take care of people. I'm going to walk through the doors that God opens, but I'm
Mhm.
not going to go chase things. And I think
Yeah.
that comes from my gambling background. Like I used to run money for a guy way back in my horse racing days, Hey, go to Detroit and get 30 grand from so and so, cash in a friggin' paper bag.
Jeez.
And that's what we called that in gambling. Somebody bet
Hmm.
5 grand,
Yeah, they're
lose.
chasing
Bet
it.
another, yeah, they start
Hmm.
chasing it. And so I've just,
Yep.
I've never done that in business, and I think that's been very important. So just the title of that book makes me want to read it.
Yeah, yeah. You definitely need to read it.
Yes.
All right. So we are to the point in the podcast where I ask three questions. We have come to the closing. We're have about a few minutes left. So, question number one: what is it that you've read or absorbed that you feel allows you to really know God? Other than the Bible, of course. A lot of people like to say that. But other than the Bible, what have you read or absorbed? What resource have you used to allow you to know God since you started your faith walk?
Well, I'll start with Proverbs, even though it is in the Bible. I think I'm not a great reader, and I don't retain well. And a buddy of mine said to me, I said, I'm struggling with trying to read the Bible. He said, well, just read Proverbs. He said, you
Mm,
take direction really well, just read Proverbs. And Proverbs so powerful. So, I mean, for years, I read Proverbs every day. Now, in our gym, after our workout, we all huddle around and we read the Jesus Calling book,
the
right?
Jesus Calling book.
Which is
Okay.
really powerful. I mean, I took a picture of today's page and posted it because
What
it's
was
just
it about today?
so. I'll read you the highlighted area.
Okay.
Um, I have the photo right here. So it'll have a reading, and then it'll have a couple of Bible verses. I always
Mm-hmm.
read the Bible verses first. So Deuteronomy 31, be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or terrified because of them, for the Lord your God goes with you. He will never leave you or forsake you. We've heard that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the reading is, do you want me to read the whole reading? It's not that
Yeah,
long.
do it. Do it. Let's do
Okay.
it.
It's I gotta zoom, I gotta blow this up a little here. This is smaller than the book.
Ah!
It's all right to be human. When your mind wanders while you are praying, don't be surprised or upset. Simply return your attention to me. Share a secret smile with me, knowing that I understand. Rejoice in my love for you, which has no limits or conditions. Whisper my name in loving contentment, assured that I will never leave you nor forsake you. As you live in close contact with me, and this is the part that I highlighted that I posted online, as you live in close contact with me, the light of my presence filters through you to bless others. And I just love that piece, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
to me,
Yeah.
that is something that I think about often. Your weaknesses and your woundness are the openings through which the light of my knowledge of my glory shines forth. My strength
Mm.
and power show themselves most efficient in your weakness.
Oh, I love that.
Going back to that vulnerability piece.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that we read every day, and
Oof.
there's just it's always spot
Mm-hmm.
on. It's pretty wild. So
Yeah, gosh, I love that. And that today's reading is super pop. I got fully charged up when you read that. It is
yes, you
so
got 10
true.
sweaty guys down there reading Jesus
Yeah.
call.
I love it. I love it. I'm gonna have to
But
get
but
that. This
but
is why
about
I
all,
asked that question.
and I would say mostly though, I get it through my music. I listen to nothing but Christian music.
Okay.
And I
What's
have
your favorite
everything.
artist?
I mean, I have a lot, like I really love Need to Breathe. Um,
Okay.
the best concert I've ever been to, and I've been to not a ton of concerts, but a lot of good concerts. I like Need to Breathe. I like Brandon Lake. Like I kind of go in and out of these, right?
Mhm.
I used to love Lauren Daigle. I mean,
Yeah.
that was,
Do you know her story?
I'm
You
not
need
sure.
to you need to look it up. You need to look up her story.
I mean, I know
I
like,
don't have time to tell it now in the
yeah, yeah, yeah.
podcast, but you'll have to look up her story. The way she came to God is amazing.
Mm.
And the way she came to music is amazing. And so you need to look that up when we
I
get
mean,
off
I know a lot of
the
it through her
podcast.
grandfather and all that stuff, but
Oh no, no. Oh no, no. It's
I'll
yeah.
definitely dig
Yeah.
into that.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, music for me is huge,
Yeah, very cool. All right, second question. And we didn't talk much about the Holy Spirit today. We're going to talk about it right now. So, when you know that you're like in full connection, when you're having that God moment, Ed smacks you in the chest and you're having that moment where there is that connection is going on, Do you have a physical manifestation for yourself? And if so, what does it feel like when you're in full connection with God?
Describe manifestation for me so I understand
Like
that.
what does it feel like in your body
Okay.
when you're having one
Yeah.
of those
So the
moments?
first time it felt like convulsions. That was probably the devil fleeing, right?
I mean, maybe
Um,
it could have been.
and that was at church, you know. I mean, I was crying so damn hard. People were coming up to me like, "Are you okay?" They were all gone. I was still in there.
Wow.
But just recently, I'll share one. And for me, it's like, you know, we talk about seasons that we go through, and I feel like God pokes you and prods you, leaves you alone for a little bit, pokes you and
Mhm.
prods you, leaves you alone for a little bit. Sometimes I think he's like, "Oh, you got a lot going on? Well, watch this. Here's some even more," you know?
Yeah.
But just recently, I had this happen to me. I'd been really getting this feeling that God was speaking to me about, okay, you've conquered alcohol, and this is the conversation, right?
Hmm.
The external people would be like, oh, yeah, he's just not drinking right now. And my track record would say that as well. God already
Hmm.
knows I'm done. So he's like, okay, you've conquered alcohol, but now here's the next thing I'm going to put on your plate. And I didn't really understand what it was yet. I just knew there was something. And I would get through that Jesus calling reading, I would get a lot of the stuff through that, but I still didn't know what it was. And then I was in the gym before we worked out. I was on the, or excuse me, it was after we worked out and I was on the treadmill. And a lot of times, what we'll do is we'll play Christian music,
Hmm.
we'll read the Jesus Calling, and then we'll turn the lights off and just be in the moment,
Hmm.
right? Well, we did that, and then I got on the treadmill, and everybody had left the room, and I just like I could hear God speaking to me in a way that like I audibly answered back. And basically he said, "Are you ready for whatever's next?" And I said, "Yes." And to the point of like, I mean, the hair on my
Mm,
arm was standing.
mm, What's happening to me right now with you
Yeah,
telling
I
that
mean, it
story?
was so tangible.
Hmm.
And I left there, I went upstairs, I got on the elevator, and Abdul, one of the guys on our team, was on the elevator, and I just started bawling. He's like, he thinks, you know, there's
Mm,
been an accident, right?
yeah.
And he's like, "Dude, brother, are you okay?" And I said, "Yeah, it's all good. You know, it's just it's very overwhelming right now." So a very just a very matter of fact feeling of it. This is how I described it to my friend. It felt like my skin changed. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
it was crazy.
Yeah.
Like beyond goosebumps, beyond your hair standing up, it
Yeah.
felt like I could feel my skin changing.
That's wild.
And yeah, it was wild.
Very cool. That's why I asked that question. It's different for everybody, so
Hmm.
it's been really cool to do these interviews
Oh, I
and then
bet.
hear, yeah, from everybody's perspective. Okay, so lastly, we'll take this back to that little boy. So if you were helping yourself on that day that
Mm.
everything happened with your mom,
Okay.
now that you know what you know about God,
Yeah.
what would you do for that little boy today? I know you said you needed to go through it because God
Yeah.
put you there for a
Yeah.
reason, but
Yeah.
what is it that you would tell yourself today?
Um, that's such a great question, and I'm trying to think about the moment, like you know all the anarchy that occurred, and then the death, right? Like, and so I'm
Hmm.
thinking about the death because that's the moment. Because what I did was I stood there and swore at her. You know, every
Wow.
word that I never heard my parents using while arguing is what I said to her, and part of me says I would say yell louder,
Yeah.
you know, because what else are you gonna do? Yell louder at her, you
Yeah.
know, and get it all out. And then the other piece of me, I would just say, it's all going to be okay someday.
Yeah.
It's not okay right now, but it's all going to be okay someday.
Well, I think it's beautiful. You said earlier in the podcast that you reached forgiveness for
Mm.
her.
Yeah,
And I think that's a beautiful thing.
yeah, and that's very freeing, you know. And it's one of those things like I watched my dad go through that
Hmm.
because the reason he ended up at that men's retreat was he got very ill in alcoholism on a
Hmm.
ventilator for weeks. I mean, darn near died. When they let him out of the hospital, they released him to me. I thought they're going to put him in a home. He was on a ventilator for 2 weeks. He could
Wow.
barely walk. He was in the
Wow.
hospital a month on a
Hmm.
ventilator for 2 weeks.
Hmm.
And once he got healthy enough, and again, alcohol, right? He's barely walking. I come down from upstairs and
Mhm.
he's in the kitchen with a bottle of wine like this. And I'm like, Dad, that's $100 bottle of wine. And and so a few weeks later, I put him in the car, I drove him to the church, and I did it so sporadically that I forgot to take him a blanket, a pillow, any of that stuff. I had to drive back up later with it. But he stayed at that retreat, and I know that he found forgiveness.
That's
And I think
beautiful.
that's the most freeing thing because this bitterness that we carry, this anger, this hate, this like it eats you from the inside
Oh,
out.
it absolutely does.
Yeah.
And your body will show the signs of it.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
And so he left that. And this is again, what's really great is like that retreat. I ended up leading that retreat, or I shouldn't say leading, the next retreat. They did it every
Mhm.
6 months. I spoke and I shared my story. Now, none of these people had heard my story. No one had heard my
Yeah.
story at this
They've just
point.
seen the outside, this beautiful
Yes, they just see
facade.
me on a
Yeah.
they just see me on a billboard, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so people were blown away. Well, we ended up growing that from like 30 people to 120.
Wow.
But then the church, of course, got involved, and people, if they're not Catholic, they can't come. I'm like, well, I wasn't Catholic when I came. So they killed the whole thing, like always, right? Before it got killed, my dad went, and that was the first time that I stepped away. I was involved in the leadership side of it for 4 retreats in a row.
Wow.
And then my dad ends up sharing his story. Now I didn't hear it, right? But that's how powerful our God is. To
Yeah.
take a broken man on the verge of death, still lost, like even death isn't enough to cure you
He
from alcohol.
never gives up. He never gives
Right.
up on us.
Right. And to
Yeah.
take him from that and to deliver him to where he is now. And by the way, he lives in Florida. He's 77 years old,
Mhm.
uh, somehow still alive and
Ah!
and still sober.
I love it.
Where he was basically and I mean damn near dead.
Wow.
So I don't remember the third question.
Oh, you already answered it. You already answered it. Wow, what a great conversation today. I'm so grateful to you for coming on
Well, I'm
and joining
grateful.
us.
Thank
Yeah.
you. I'm grateful, and I feel like
Yeah.
I'm going to leave this podcast and just go love on my wife a little bit.
Go do that. Give her all the love. Give her
Yeah,
all the love.
yeah.
She stayed by you and forgave you and gave you mercy in the way Jesus would. So you need to go love on her for that.
She was sent. I mean, we met on Match.com. Only person I ever talked to,
Mhm.
dated, married, and engaged in 6 months, married in a year, and here we are. So
Yeah. You're a
yeah,
lucky guy, man.
I'm blessed and
Mhm.
I'm grateful.
Yeah. And you've done the work, and that's what
Well, and
matters.
I got a lot more work to do.
Okay. Well, John, thank you so much for
Thank
being
you.
on today. Thank you all for listening to Evolve Through God today with John Wentworth as our guest. So grateful for him and grateful for all of you. So thank you all, and we'll talk to you the next episode.